Live from Shore Manor Studios, this is Tales from a Small Town Journalist with Matt Shore.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories you are only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities just like yours. I'm Matt Shore, and I was one of those reporters for almost 10 years before I finally hung up my camera and my notepad. And in that time, I got to know some really unique and interesting people. Had some interesting experiences. I got to know some other reporters who also got to know some interesting people and had some really interesting experiences. Before I go any further, I do want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast, supported by listeners just like you. There are a couple of great ways that you could show us some support. First and foremost would be to show a little financial love. Go visit my website, www.mattshore.net. Check out the bookstore and see if there's any books you'd like to purchase from us. We have children's books, we have adult fiction, we have horror, we have science fiction. It's a pretty good gamut of just about everything in there. So please check that out. We'd really appreciate it if you did. But another great way to show some support for us is just to get the word out about this podcast. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a loved one. I used to tell you to grab them and give them a good shake, but make sure you maintain 6 feet right now. So just yell at them from a distance while wearing a mask, of course. Make sure that you are safe in this pandemic time. But get the word out one way or another. Also, social media, Facebook, Twitter, everything and anything you've got, get the word out and let people know about this crazy little podcast and its goofy host and the cool stories that it shares. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my tree behind me. This is actually not our official Christmas tree. This was an early Christmas present from my wife. As you can see on YouTube, that it is a black tree with Halloween-themed lights. For those of you listening, I'll try to describe it as best I can. It's a standard little tree, nothing super special about it, but Amanda knew how much I loved Halloween. She loves it too, by the way, and she could not resist the opportunity to get me a Halloween-themed tree for Christmas that we will slowly decorate with various horror icons like Dracula, Frankenstein, Michael Myers, maybe even Freddy Krueger someday, and find some kind of cool topper to put on the top of it, like a glowing skull or something really good. Right now it's rather humble. It's just a black tree with purple and orange lights, but I'm super proud of this thing. I love it. So couldn't resist the chance to share that with everybody out there. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking with George Robinson. George Robinson is a returning guest for me. People are starting to come back. Maybe they get a kick out of talking to me. Maybe they have nothing better to do. Hopefully they like being a part of this. So, George Robinson is a sports journalist for the Leaf-Chronicle newspaper in Clarksville, Tennessee. We are going to be talking about the year that was, 2020. It's coming to a close, and about the top news and things that happened for this year. Last year, I talked with Lee Landini Wright about this. She's a journalism assistant professor over at Murray State University, and that was the original plan for today's episode, but she's undergone some surgery. I'm not going to go into details about it. That's her business, but she's recovering from that right now, and it's just it's a lengthy process, but she will get better, and looking forward to chatting with her again about the impact of on journalism that things of 2020 and in the years to come have on the industry. But Lee, get well soon. We need good, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed journalists, and you are helping to create those. But I do want to mention, just in case anyone gets the impression that George was a sort of a secondary backup pick or whatever, that's not the case. My plan for George was actually to ring in the new year with him. I thought that'd be a good way to kick off 2021 by a returning guest, but life happened, and here we are. So George and I are going to have a great conversation about 2020, the year that everyone hates and can't wait to be rid of. And then I've got to come up with some kind of a good plan for January. So stay tuned for that as well. But in the meantime, Let's switch over and let's chat with George Robinson about 2020 and all the big things that happened. Okay, so speaking with George Robinson, sports writer for the Leaf-Chronicle, a returning guest, which hopefully is a good sign that people don't mind coming back. Uh, we'll start off with just welcoming George back. George, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Oh, just making it. That's all any of us can do in 2020. It seems to be just get by as best we can.
Yeah, the year is almost over. Can you believe that?
Yeah,
Can you,
it
can you not wait for the year to be over at this point?
not at all. It only took about 20 years, but we're almost done with it.
It has been it's been the longest, most frustrating, most just crazy year that I can remember in my lifetime. I'm 45 years old, so the only thing I can equate it to is, when I talked to my parents and they talked about the 1960s, it's probably about the only thing that I can compare this year to is those kind of turbulent years in that decade in the 60s with the Vietnam War protest and civil rights movement, and then the assassinations of JFK, RFK, Dr. King, Malcolm X, all of that. The only difference is we've had one really terrible year. That was a pretty difficult decade. I'd say from about 62 on. And that's not including, the early civil rights movement that began in the late 50s. But from about 1962 on, from the Cuban Missile Crisis on, man, I think the 60s were just pretty much, just a, I don't know how you would explain it. I mean, just out of control. So we've had one bad year. They had a difficult decade, to say the least.
That's a good perspective on it. This was a definitely rough year, but and I guess time will tell. But hopefully we've squeezed all this into one year, and maybe things at the very least will settle down. I'm not looking for utopia in 2021, but maybe just
Utopia is long gone,
yeah.
man. We're just looking to get back to just some kind of semblance of normalcy that we just haven't had in at least 9 months, at
Yeah.
least.
Well, let's get into that. The biggest thing that impacted everybody, of course, for 2020, both in journalists and just life in general for all of us, was COVID-19. It upended all of our lives, how we all function. So many of us are working from home, and a lot of journalists have started working from home. But you, as a sports writer, kind of a different position there. That's not quite an option for you. It's you still have to go and cover these games. I've been watching you on Twitter. You're definitely still pretty active out there.
Right. And the thing about it is, Gannett, our parent company, set set down some guidelines about how we, particularly for sports writers, how we were going to go about covering high school football games, high school soccer. Golf wasn't really an issue because golf just inherently, kind of lends itself to being kind of social distancing, on a golf course, but cross country as well. They laid some guidelines down for us as sports writers on how to kind of handle ourselves when we're at games. Obviously, masks are absolutely required. They're a requirement in any game that we were, going to go to and cover. Obviously we tried to social distance as much as we could. Football games were a little easy to do that because you're outside in the open stadium, open air. So there was a little less, I guess, concern about whether or not you would be kind of exposed to the virus because we were outside. But again, there was some concern with, the number of fans that were in attendance. Obviously players that congregate on the sidelines. For us as reporters, they wanted us to be in the end zones. Usually there's nobody, there's no players in the end zones. There's no referees over there. There's no fans on the two end zones. So, those were kind of our, as reporters, those were kind of our spots to kind of hang out and cover the game was those end zones. And separating us from the majority of the players on the sidelines, and obviously keeping the fans at a distance as well. But it was certainly challenging. I haven't been to the Leaf-Chronicle office since probably the first week of March. I think I've been in there twice since then. That was only to go in there, pick up a couple of few things, and come right back out. So it's certainly changed the way that I operate on a daily basis, in terms of writing stories, covering the community here in Clarksville, covering the high school sports scene here in Clarksville and Austin Peay as well. So it's definitely been a big change for us, for everybody. But us included as sports journalists, and we've kind of adapted just like everybody else has, and kind of learned to deal with whatever limitations are out there, and sort of how we operate.
I won't ask for any names, but have you, within the sports journalism field, is there anybody that has contracted COVID-19 at this point?
Well, not anybody that I know of in terms of colleagues, but my dad did get it. He just from a personal story. My father contracted it probably about a month ago. So he's doing fine. He wasn't asymptomatic. He had some symptoms. He felt like he told me it felt like the flu. He has his good days and bad days. I think his days sort of start out in the morning feeling pretty good. But as the day sort of kind of winds its way through, he gets tired really quickly. So he's dealing a lot with the fatigue aspect of it. Obviously he was taking some medication for it as well. That certainly helped. He's definitely not on the terrible end of the spectrum with it. He hasn't been hospitalized or anything like that, but he hasn't felt great. So, the terrible thing about this virus is that the range of how it affects people, so from some people absolutely having no symptoms and feeling absolutely fine, and some people not even knowing that they have it, to people who are in ICU and who are dying, every single day. That's, just the difference in the spectrum of symptoms is what terrifies, I think, most people. And even though the percentages of people who are contracting it and then being hospitalized or dying are low, the fact that you just don't know how it will affect you, and trying to be vigilant and not spread it to anybody else who may be adversely affected by it. Those are the things that I think most Americans are sort of grappling with, along with the addition of, people being upset about, their local government or state government or federal government telling them what to do. That's always an issue with our society here in America. But, just the simple fact of not really knowing how the virus is going to, is going to affect you or somebody that you love or somebody that really well. Not knowing really how that's going to affect each and every person is really the kind of stressful thing that I think everybody kind of goes through.
Yeah, I feel that. How is your dad? Is he past it now, or is he still dealing with it?
I think he's still. I don't think he's positive. I don't think he's. I don't think he currently has it. I think he's just right now dealing with the effects of it, the after effects of it. I guess in the medical community they call it the long haulers. Those are people who have long-term effects that are associated with COVID, that they have to kind of struggle with or deal with. I don't know that he's really in that category yet, because it's still, it happened so recently, and he's just now kind of getting over it. So we'll see how he progresses in the next few months or so, and see if he has any lingering lingering effects from it. But right now he's doing fine. He's doing good. Like I said, he feels good physically. He just gets tired, really easily. Especially throughout the course of the day. By the end of the day, he's pretty worn out, and he's already retired, so he's not doing much anyway. So that kind of tells you a little bit of the of what that virus can do to you, physically.
Yeah, I haven't got the permission to say it, but I hope I'm okay saying this. My parents actually caught it too, as well, and so did my grandmother. They all share a home right now, and my both of my parents. The thing that, because I checked in with them every day, and it's been several months now, but for 2-3 weeks, what they would tell me is like every symptom would be gone, but they would just be so exhausted all day, and I just couldn't imagine what that was like. And we talk about the spectrum and how it affects you. Like my grandmother ended up being hospitalized, and that she came out, which is kind of amazing. And we've talked about how resilient my grandmother apparently is, because my gosh, she's recovered from so many things, and now she recovered from this. But it was a scary few weeks for us. So I kind of know where you're coming from there.
Yeah, it's been like I said, it's been the past 9 months have just been it's been a whirlwind, but it's also been a slow process. So I think, we were kind of joking about it before we started recording that, we'll just be glad when the year is over with. And, certainly I know everybody's kind of anxiously anticipating this vaccine, to be distributed. I don't know how long it'll take to get everybody vaccinated. My guess is, a little over a year. So, we're going to have to deal with this in some form or fashion, for at least another year. I would guess, hopefully over the course of as the months go on, it'll be less and less, maybe things can start to go back to normal. But certainly there's no cure for it, obviously, just like there's no cure for the flu, but we get our flu shots every year. So at least I do. Especially with 2 kids, 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, I have to get my flu shot. The last time I had the flu, I was in college. So I certainly don't want the flu. Don't want COVID. I'm doing my darndest to keep from both happening. So as soon as this vaccine's available and they figure out it's safe and they give everybody the go ahead and, they have enough to distribute it, I'll be right in line with everybody else to get it.
Now, there's like an online app. I checked to see where I will stand in line, and I'm way, way in the back. So, but I think a lot of us fairly healthy people will be, among the last to get it. And I'm completely 100% okay with that. Get it to the people who need it the most, and the elderly, people with pre-existing conditions. Obviously, I wouldn't even. I know it's not hit young kids particularly hard, but I would even be okay with school age children getting it. Before I do. Just inoculate as many of the people that absolutely need it immediately as you can. Absolutely. I think we've lingered on COVID long enough. People have been talking about that for a year. They probably don't want to talk anymore. So one other really big thing.
We can go another year with this conversation about.
Oh, COVID. we could, but who wants to do that? But let's go to something a bit more comfortable. Let's talk about the Black Lives Matter movement being a big thing of 2020. That certainly isn't going to cause any controversy.
No.
That rose up at, I thought, for whatever this is worth, I thought it was a rather inopportune time simply because it was in the middle of this pandemic. I remember thinking, gosh, this is important. These voices are important, but did it have to happen while people are getting sick and dying? And apparently it did. But I'll turn to you. Like, how did this impact you? We'll start with, as a journalist, what sort of impact did it have on the work you do?
Well, obviously, those situations, those subject matters are never convenient. And, among the Black community, it's something that we have been sort of shouting about, crying about, trying to draw attention to for decades. This isn't anything new for since the end of the Civil War and Reconstruction, really. Black folks have been sort of bringing attention to issues like these. Certainly in the past, I'd say 80 years. The how the Black community has sort of been targeted, with police brutality, if that be the case, or racism in general. I think these are issues that are never convenient for people. There's certainly never a time where people are going to feel the most comfortable about talking about it. But you had a situation with the George Floyd murders, and then the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and then of course in my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, with Breonna Taylor. These issues, they happen to kind of come about, kind of coalesce right around the same time, and nobody could have foresaw the COVID-19 pandemic, but you had all of these things kind of coming together along with this election year. So you had all these things kind of coming together all at once, and like I said, it's never convenient, but it's things that we have to address. And the thing about our culture, and the thing about the American people, is we're capable of addressing all of these issues. We're capable of multitasking. We're capable of kind of rolling up our sleeves and tackling these issues. We just have to be willing to do it. We have to be willing to talk about it. We have to be willing to address it and figure out solutions for it. And like I said, there's never going to be a convenient time to talk about it. It just so happens that it happened during the middle of a pandemic, and as a journalist, I think the first thing that we have as journalists the first responsibility we have is to try to tell as much of the truth as possible. Now, as a journalist, you're also taught to be unbiased in your opinion and in your reporting, and that's absolutely correct. I think you have to be fair and balanced in that, but you also have to not kind of shy away from it, not shy away from the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests that have gone on, and to me there's a distinction between the protests that have gone on, and I guess what a lot of people may consider the Black Lives Matter movement or organization. I think, obviously the Black Lives Matter organization is an organization that's really about trying to bring to light and to bring attention to the fact that just what their slogan is, or what their organization name is Black Lives Matter. I've seen a lot of people who say, well, blue lives matter, white lives matter, everybody matters, which is true. But the Black Lives Matter statement is not an exclusive statement. It's not excluding any other people. It's a matter. It's not Black Lives Matters. Black Lives Matter only. It's Black Lives Matter too. And I think that's an important distinction that I want people to understand is Black folks aren't trying to tell you that their lives matter above and beyond anybody else's. I think they're just trying to say, what we're trying to say is for a long time, our lives have been disregarded. And we're trying to stand up and say, well, our lives matter as well being the key phrase there, in addition to everybody else's lives. Because for so long, for decades, our lives have kind of been kind of pushed to the side and acted as if we don't exist, or our lives aren't as important as as anybody else's. So this is just an opportunity for us to to kind of speak on that and speak out about it and try to get people to understand the struggles and the issues that go on among our community and and trying to find solutions to that. But again, as a journalist, you try to highlight those issues and report on them as fairly and as and as thoroughly as you can.
Yeah, and speaking of inconvenient timing and how it is never convenient. You're right, kind of rightly chastised me for that. But the pandemic, I think, is sort of tied into that a little bit this year, because I think one of the things that it did is it has kind of brought to light, and not kind of, like absolutely brought to light the health disparities that exist today, like who is more vulnerable and who isn't.
Right.
And that really, it doesn't get a whole lot of play. It seemed like it didn't get a whole lot of play in the coverage that I saw of the all the protests and the gatherings, but it's certainly a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, you're talking about in terms of how COVID-19 has affected minority communities, or?
It has effect, yes, that's a big one, and also just poorer communities in general. They don't even have to be minorities, but minorities have definitely been.
Yeah.
I believe
Right.
one of the last reports I saw, like the hardest hit was the Latino community.
Right, and a lot of that has to do with access to healthcare, access to viable hospitals and healthcare insurance. All of those things tie into sort of your socio-economical, economic situation as an individual or as a family. Those are things that, like I said, when we're talking about what journalists' role in all of this, that's one of our roles, is to kind of highlight that and so that we can understand the disparity and why that disparity exists, and what are some solutions that are being presented to sort of deal with those disparities or deal with those issues. I don't think it's just enough for us to say, hey, look, COVID-19 is affecting the Black community, the Latino community, the poor community, more so than it is well, we kind of know that, we can kind of figure that would be the case if your access to proper health care, if your access to emergency care is lacking. That any kind of disease or pandemic or any kind of health issue is going to affect you at a greater rate. The issue really is, how do we fix that? Who do we go to? Who do we talk to? And are our local leaders willing to address them in an honest way? Are they willing to listen? Are they willing to kind of roll up their sleeves and do the work necessary to kind of bridge those gaps? Part of what we've seen through, the past 4 years, but really the past, I would say the past 10 years, is this, sort of division of our culture along political lines, and how that's affected our way of thinking, how that's affected, some news organizations' way of presenting the news. In part of that, is how social media has sort of driven us into our own little corners, our own little like-minded bubbles, in which we are not willing to listen to the other point of view or the other side without attacking them. That's been a huge issue in this country for a while now, and it's been exacerbated, I'd say, the past 4 years, certainly, and certainly this past year, with everything that's kind of been going on, the frustration mounts, the uncertainty, increases, our fear increases, and we all know what fear can do to us as we, you know, as we become more and more afraid of things that we don't understand. We sort of dig in our heels and sort of go into kind of protection mode. Defense mechanism is like a defense mechanism, so that we're not hurt or scarred by sort of some of the things that we see or are experiencing in our culture. So it's like I said, it's up to us as journalists to kind of expose some of that and try to figure out, try to talk to the right people who have solutions for these things. Because we can go on and talk all day about what the problems are, and we know what the problems are. I think most people want to know, well, how are we going to fix these problems?
Yeah, of all the things of 2020 that I hope go away, the Black Lives Matter conversation, I definitely hope does not. I hope that one continues on. And as
Yeah,
we talked,
and I have to
sure.
say, real quickly about Black Lives Matter. I'm from Louisville, so the Breonna Taylor issue was a huge, has been a huge uh, narrative in across the country. I have family members who were out there in protest in Louisville. So I understand what has been kind of going on, particularly since the spring hit and the summer. um I've never seen as many white people who have stepped up to the plate, so to speak, and have put their lives on the line, have put their voices out there in support. I think that is absolutely 100% crucial and necessary. I think back to the civil rights movement and the support that Dr. King and the SCLC organization that he ran, the support that he received from so many people that were willing to kind of put their lives and risk their reputations to make sure that sort of we all had equality within our grasp. I don't think the civil rights movement would have been nearly as successful without that support. And certainly bringing attention to it from a media standpoint was a large part of Dr. King's sort of how he wanted to kind of operate the civil rights movement. He needed that he needed that exposure. So the exposure that we've seen, over the past, 6, 7, 8 months, with Black Lives Matter, and not only in this country, but all over the world, really. You look in Europe, and they were protesting in Europe in mass protests, tens of thousands of people in the streets in Europe protesting, in similar fashion. That kind of support, that kind of notoriety and attention is absolutely crucial to kind of bring sort of to highlight the inequity that exists. Those being able to do that has been crucial. And white folks all over the country, man, they've stepped up. And it's been it's been much appreciated. Black folks have been screaming this for like I said, over 100 years, man. And it's, I'd say it's only marginally better than it was 100 years ago. I say marginally because, there's still a lot of needless and senseless killings that exist. And 80 years ago, it was lynchings. It was hanging from trees. Now it's, knees in your neck for, until you can't breathe, or a chokehold that's been outlawed by your police force that that you're using illegally, to restrain a suspect or and then eventually killing that person. It's gunshots to the back with your hands up. That's the if you want to call it the new the modern day lynching, then that's what I know what some people have expressed it to be.
So much to say on that. Like I said, I hope that conversation continues, and if all I ever do is just sit and listen, then that's what I want to do. But we can always pick that up another time because yeah, there's so much to say. Uh, the other big thing, of course, that happened in 2020, just recently happened and is sort of still happening, is of course the presidential election. And we're not going to get into any political feelings on that, but we'll stick with just how that has impacted journalists. I know that traditionally on election night, that's always an all hands on deck. In normal years, they would serve pizza for everybody in the office. This year, I'm pretty sure that did not happen.
Well, actually, it did at the Leaf-Chronicle.
Oh,
The Leaf-Chronicle, we don't have a very large staff anyway. We have about three or four reporters, and we just hired a new editor, Gary Estwick, who's been doing a fantastic job over the past couple of. Well, I guess it's been about 2 months now. He's been on the job, so he's taken over there. So we don't have a large Leaf Chronicle staff anyway, not like we used to. 10, 12 years ago, and if we had a pandemic back then and then we had election night, we wouldn't have been able to have the pizza night in the in the office. There have been just too many people there. Nobody would have showed up. But I think this year there were some they did have pizza there at the Leaf Chronicle. There obviously the reporters were there, working throughout the night to kind of keep us updated on particularly local and state elections. I think everybody kind of was watching the presidential election, but keeping us up to date on the local elections here in Clarksville and the state, some of the state races that were going on as well. So they were able to have pizza night. I was not there this year. I've done some election coverage over the years. But like I said, I haven't been to the Leaf office very much since last March. So I wasn't necessarily there for election night. I missed the pizza and I regret that, but they probably didn't need me in the way. There's even in the years where I've done some election coverage, it was very minimal. I don't think a lot of the reporters would trust a sports writer to be able to go out and cover a city council election or or a state representative, or I don't think that they would have trusted me very much with with kind of giving you the real lowdown. I'm good enough to look at poll numbers, and I can tweet that out and I can share that. I'm good with poll numbers. I'm not very good with going out to an election party and talking to the winner or the loser.
it can't be any less fast paced than a football game.
Oh, but see, I understand football.
Okay.
First it's 3rd and 13. I know it's a long shot. If it's 4th down and if it's 4th and 3, I know you're going to punt it. So, but on election night, if you're down, a certain percentage point with about an hour left before the polls close, I couldn't tell you who's going to, which way that's going to turn out. So it's best if I just kind of waited until the end of the election to figure out who the winner is. Our staff does a great job with all that. Jennifer Babbage and like I said, Gary Estwick, our new editor there at the Leaf Chronicle. They do Jimmy Settle. He's been there forever. He's been there longer than I have. I think we're the two longest surviving Leaf Chronicle employees right now. Everybody else is, fairly new within the past few years. Alexis is a new breaking news reporter for us. She came last year, so she's been here about a year. Jennifer's been there for a few years now. And of course, like I said, Jimmy Settle. So, so we got a fantastic staff who did a great job during election night.
Well, traditionally, when there's an election, it tends to just be one night, and then that you report on that, and that's the end of it. Now, this particular election, presidential one, we have a unique situation where we have a candidate that has refuse to concede and things are dragging out. And like I said, we're not going to get into any feelings on that, but has that impacted local journalism that you're aware of as far as covering that, since like you're basically still covering an election even though we're a month out?
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily affected us locally. I think everybody kind of has their own personal feelings about it. Obviously, a lot of those sentiments run along party lines, Republican, Democrat. You know, Tennessee's traditionally been a Republican state, and Clarksville's traditionally, Montgomery County's traditionally been a Republican county as well. I was really impressed with the turnout, the voter turnout, not only here in Clarksville and Montgomery County, but all across the country. Even, I did early voting. I didn't do the mail-in thing. I didn't want to go that route, but I did want to make sure that I had a chance to vote earlier than the November 2nd or November 3rd that we voted. Um, yes, one of those days. I wanted to vote before then because I felt like the voting lines were going to be just outrageous. Uh, and so I did that. I did.
Even with
Yeah,
early
they were
voting,
outrageous even. That's
because I
exactly what
was
I was
there
going to
too.
say. Yeah, we went to the election commission over there by the library in Clarksville, and well, we got in line. Now the line moved pretty good, pretty briskly. So I was happy about that because I hate any kind of long lines of traffic. I'm just not a person that deals with traffic on the highway very well. Dealing with long lines. So when we got out and parked and we had to get in that line, that line was wrapped all the way around that election commission building, and all the way around to the other side around where I think Crossland was. So um, but I got in line. It moved pretty quickly. I didn't have to stand around very long in the same spot. I did my voting and got out of there and got back home. And like I said, the numbers from early voting were tremendous here in Montgomery County. I think they broke records. So as well as national records were broken in terms of total number of people that voted. I know. I think I read somewhere that Biden received a record amount of popular votes in the history of the presidency. Just voting in general, and I think even Trump uh, broke some records in terms of popular vote. It's just that Biden had more of the popular vote. So both candidates broke records. It was just it was an incredible turnout and sort of indicative of how this election season has gone in terms of how people have responded to both candidates, both negatively and positively, how they've responded to both candidates, and how important I think everybody felt that this election was going to be.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I was impressed as well, and yeah, our election commission did a great job. Yeah, and speaking of just the sentiments that people had, there was one interview somebody had. They interviewed somebody standing in line and said, "How long have you been waiting?" And he said, "4 years." So,
Perfect answer.
yeah, that was a good one.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been really good. I appreciate you taking the time. I know that it was a little bit short notice, but
That's okay.
thank you for clearing your schedule for me. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. It's always fun to catch up with you. I think everybody knows that you're a former Leaf-Chronicle employee, so you know how election nights are and how the newsroom used to be. Not so much now, but I know you're pretty experienced in all of that. So it's always good catching up with you, man. Anytime, anytime.
Thanks, George. Thanks again for taking the time to speak with me and for sharing some of your thoughts as we looked back on 2020 and some of the things that happened, because it was pretty big. For all the dislike, we'll just say, that so many of us have for 2020, and rightly so, quite frankly. You cannot say that it was not an eventful year. A lot of big things happened that probably changed the course of history, not just in our community, not just in our country, but probably on a global scale. Um, I don't think any of us are going to come out of 2020 the same as we did going in it. So, uh, as we move on toward the holidays, Christmas season is upon us. Everybody, I just want to stress, stay safe. Listen to your doctors. Listen to what healthcare officials and professionals are saying. Uh, you know, um, do not discount what they're telling you as I don't know, foolish or stupid or whatever. This is a very serious thing that's happened that we're dealing with. And they're the ones who are on the front lines uh, dealing with the fallout of it. And when they tell us, the ways to stay safe and the ways to slow the spread of this disease as best we can, even with a vaccine on the horizon, it is just so important to listen to what they have to say. So if the doctors are telling us do not gather in big groups for Christmas Day to open presents, then difficult as it is, we really do need to pay attention to them, listen to what they're saying, because these people know what they're talking about. It's certainly not pleasant. I'm not thrilled at the idea, but what one person said, and I've said it since, is sacrifice the holidays of 2020 so that we can all be here to enjoy them in 2021. So, not that my podcast is going to make a whole lot of difference and change a whole lot of minds, but if it can get through to just one person, then hey, fantastic. So, stay safe, stay healthy. The world is better with you in it. So now comes the part where I have to move into some very important information that I got to relay to you guys. So bear with me, pay attention. This is important stuff. At least I think so. You can find each and every episode of this podcast on my official website, www.mattshore.net. Just click on the podcast option at the menu up top, or you can get there directly at www.mattshore.net/smalltownjournalist. This podcast also has an official Twitter account at Journalist Tales. Please look us up there and follow us. We're trying to build it up as much as we can. Follow, like, retweet if you will. Meanwhile, you can find our official YouTube channel at tinyurl.com/Shore Manor YouTube. I wanted to make it easy to find, so I created a tiny URL for it. So please subscribe to us there. We'd like to get some more subscribers. My personal goal right now is 25, be it ever so humble. So that's tinyurl.com/Shore Manor YouTube, or just get on your YouTube app and look up Shore Manor. If you're a bit more old school on social media, Shore Manor also has an official Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Shore Manor. Follow us there for news about this podcast, my upcoming book publications, and general kooky shenanigans from our family. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, there are several ways to do so. I'm on Twitter at @TheMattShore and Instagram at The Shore. Follow me there. Let me know you're coming because of this podcast, and I will follow you back. And of course, there's the more direct method of email, mattshore@hotmail.com. So thanks again for checking out this podcast, everybody. Everybody stay safe. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And keep reading and keep listening. Thanks.